All right, I want to welcome you back to the Principals Podcast. This is season 4. Chaim, what episode is this? 11, 12?
I think it's 11.
Okay, it's season 4, episode 11 or 12. Regardless, it's been a while since we have had a podcast. We've had a holiday. Today's guests, we've asked them, not officially, but kind of tongue in cheek, to be on a podcast so that everyone could get to know them better. Our guest today is Dr. Hanlon and Steve Kofol. Joining us also is Ms. Pavasek and Doug Hyam. The purpose of this podcast is really asking some questions. A lot of information has been sent out by Dr. Hanlon's office, the district. A lot of things have come from our office regarding what's going on at the high school. You know, I spoke to a grandma yesterday that just heard it third wheel. Like, I heard that you guys, don't have part of your building. And then she wasn't talking like that. I'm just making that up. But I had to explain it to her. So there are people out there that don't know. So we're trying to create every avenue to provide information. So Dr. Hanlon, thank you for joining us. Steve Kofol, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate the opportunity. And I would echo that. Yes, we had a little bit of a lump of coal in our stocking over the holiday. And there was a big surprise in our district on December 26th as we unraveled the flood that occurred at the high school, and it's obviously had a big impact on our school district, and we've been working very hard to respond to that.
Yes, I remember clearly. Dr. Hanlon was there, Steve Kofol, myself, and it was boots on ground. There were a lot of team in our district. Our entire custodial staff, maintenance staff were there to remove water, step number one. So I know that we'll take time to show gratitude later, but one of the purpose of this is yesterday there was a really comprehensive communication that went out specifically to the high school families. But it's important for anyone, not just in the high school, but anyone in the district to understand this process, because when you hear and see a plan that says an asbestos abatement plan overview, people have natural reactions. And you did a very good job. And I know that other people, certified professionals, reviewed it before it went out. Could you talk to us a little bit about the asbestos abatement plan, some of the things that certified professionals talk to you about, and all the checks and balances that go on that have nothing to do with our personnel, so that we can keep students and staff safe?
Absolutely. And I think it's important to take a step back first and just note that anytime you're dealing with a school the age of Chardon High School, there is always going to be the presence of what we call ACBM, or asbestos-containing building materials, in those schools. And most schools of the vintage of Chardon High School went through an abatement process many decades ago when the dangers of asbestos were first identified, and all of the really dangerous pipe wrap, insulation, things of that nature were safely removed from schools. And then fast forward to today, our school district is required to have on hand a plan that documents all of the asbestos containing materials in our school district. And we update that plan on a 3-year basis. We also document in that book anytime there is a small abatement project, we deal with that and document it so that we have records of when the district undertakes some abatement. So, why is it necessary for us to do an abatement project at this time? The flood had an unfortunate byproduct to it, which was that water made its way into the floor tiles of all of these classrooms that were affected and made its way into the concrete. As that water tries to make its way back out of the concrete, those floor tiles, which are asbestos containing building materials, start popping all over the floor surface. That creates a new condition for that ACBM that has otherwise been left untouched for many, many years. And now we have to undertake that abatement process. So that's what's kind of brought us to this point, and why we need to address it at this point before we make our return into those classrooms.
I appreciate that. And can you tell us the companies that are working with us? Like, who do we outsource some of these things to?
Yeah, absolutely. So Safe Air is our abatement contractor, and we have successfully used Safe Air for many, many projects in our school district. They worked on window replacement at Maple Elementary School last summer. They did the abatement work around those. Steve, I'm sure, can fill in for me, but so I mean, I'll turn it to him, and he can probably comment on the projects that Safe Air has done.
Yeah, they've worked on the Munson boiler project, the Munson tile replacement, the high school tile replacement in the 200s, the high school choir room and band room way back when those were redone. Several. That's just to name a few off the top of my head.
And it's important to understand that Safe Air is a licensed, certified abatement contractor through the EPA, which governs these types of projects. So our own maintenance personnel have the ability to do smaller abatement projects, but obviously the scope of this is significant, which is why we're using Safe Air. In addition to Safe Air, excuse me, we also have EA Group, which is an environmental monitoring consulting group, and their function will be to do air quality testing. Whenever you undertake an abatement project, you need to do consistent air quality standard testing to make sure that, both in the work environment as well as any spaces outside of that work environment, that you're maintaining a safe and healthy standard for individuals to be around that workspace.
So obviously you've been a superintendent for a couple decades and you've done projects like this. Obviously the ones that you mentioned here at Chardon local schools, you've done things in Painesville City before also.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been involved with abatement projects all the way through to the scope of doing a building demolition where you have to remove every bit of asbestos that remains before you demolish a structure. So, excuse me, still fighting off a little bit of cold here. So abatement projects are not anything new to the school environment, and I've seen a number of those happen over time. And again, the key point here is that we always want to do those, whether it be the demolition of a building or the abatement of floor tiles, as it is in this case. We want to make sure that we're doing that in absolutely the safest industry-approved standards, with those in mind, and making sure that first and foremost those safety requirements are being adhered to at every turn while we're doing the abatement process.
Yeah, I appreciate this information and, being boots on ground, but as a parent to understand it, from what's the school doing and how there's professionals that are certainly involved in this. Steve, I think Doug was working up a question here. He wants to ask you regarding what's happening currently.
Steve, as you can probably share with everyone, there's a lot going on in the high school that many people can't see from outside. And that's probably the norm when people start doing work inside. Can you tell us a little bit about what has happened inside the building to provide a safe environment for everyone here at Chardon High School?
Sure. First of all, after our initial cleanup, we got rid of the standing water. We started the next phase of the cleanup project, which was we identified the abatement issue with ACBM, and we made sure that we contacted the folks immediately to get them on site to assess the situation. While, as Dr. Hanlon noted, everything is going to be industry standard and making sure our kids and staff are very safe throughout this process. What's occurred after that is the construction company has put up some walls in the various areas to seal off areas from students and staff. Those are drywall walls that have been sealed from the outside with tape, as well as on the inside. When the abatement contractor Safe Air gets to work, they have put an additional wall behind that, a plastic wall that's sealed off and is airtight. Over the past several days, Safe Air has been going through and sealing off lockers, air vents, any gaps between the 100s ceiling and the 300s floor. So that way there's no air exchange that is going to penetrate places that shouldn't be penetrated. And throughout this entire process, they have negative air. So basically, air is not going to be pushed out from there other than through exhaust fans, which are first gone through HEPA filtration to make sure that there are no fibers or anything that are leaving the room. The machines that they're using have HEPA filters built right on them. So as they're removing tile and removing the mastic material, the machine itself is filtering the air as well as the additional air that is going through the HEPA filter for exhaust, giving it that negative air movement in the room itself.
Steve, you work with a lot of staffing in our district across the board, from certified, classified individuals, and sometimes with the certified. Have we been fortunate to work with companies that have proper staffing? How's the timeline looking? Are we behind? Are we ahead of schedule compared to where others are?
So we kind of did a two-pronged approach right at the beginning. We're required to, anytime you do an abatement project, you have to file paperwork with the EPA in regards to the scope of the project. And that process usually takes 14 days. We'd filed for an emergency approval permit to start prior to the 14 days, which we were granted. That's allowing us to start actually tomorrow. The abatement contractors are actually going to start removing tile tomorrow. And that was a big win for us to give us a few extra days to get ahead of that 14-day wait period. It's like with anything else that we've been doing in construction land, there is always timelines that are best laid out that may not be met due to supply chain issues, due to equipment breakage, due to staffing. So currently, we try to address those issues as they raise their ugly heads, and to keep the project going as quickly, but most importantly, as safely as possible, because we certainly don't want to rush anything that it is going to cause anybody to be unsafe. So I want it done obviously quickly, but I also want it done right.
Absolutely. And you and Dr. Hanlon talk with a lot of districts, I'm sure, every day about various things. Is this situation that occurred to us only, to what we're dealing with because of our building, or are other districts dealing with similar experiences over the holidays?
Well, I can share with you that I'm aware of Cleveland schools alone had 23 different schools affected by this winter storm and had weather-related impacts, whether it be flooding or other issues. And that was just one school district having 23 schools impacted. I'm also aware of probably 8 to 10 school districts that had pipe breaks and, are dealing with losing gym floors, losing classroom spaces. So this is, it was just a severe turn of events with the weather, and the impact was significant. So, it's not specific to Chardon schools, that's for certain. Even
Right.
Kenston's dealing with some flooding issues in their middle schools, I understand it.
Can either of you we talk about the barriers that are put up, but in order to get the barriers put up, we have to have dry locations that are deemed safe. So can you talk about the initial steps that took several days, and the measures that were taken by Cleveland Fire and Flood to make sure that we were ready for the next staging?
Yeah, so Cleveland Fire and Water Restoration, they were on site really the day of the cleanup to begin their initial assessment and start. And yes, absolutely. The goal was to dry out the facility first and then deal with the aftermath of that. Now, it's very simple to say we're just going to dry it out, but the process used to dry it out is not that simple. The building, again, the affected spaces were enclosed to create a chamber, if you will. There was specialized dehumidifying equipment brought in to circulate air. Openings were created in cabinetry and baseboards, things like that, to get at spaces to make sure that they were dry. Treatment, antimicrobial treatment, was used to prevent mold growth and other bacterial growth that may have occurred as a result of the flooding. Desiccant was used to promote the drying process and so on. So it was a very extensive process, and again, overseen by our insurance company to monitor the dry out process and get us to the point where we can start moving forward with the floor tile.
Without going into the details, you mentioned insurance. There's the details are beyond even comprehension, because every piece that needs to be, assessed, take pictures of, that work is really coming trifold between all of us, but also Deb Armbruster. Like, what work is she doing within the insurance and the adjustment and the technology groups? Can you tell us a little bit about that for anyone that might have a question?
Certainly, and yes, I would say that Deb's done a tremendous job working behind the scenes with respect to all of the financial implications associated with this. Our school district has property fleet liability insurance through the Ohio School Plan, which is a consortium of school districts that pool their insurance. It gives us advantageous insurance rates. They were very responsive to the flooding that occurred in our school. The adjuster was regularly on site in the initial days of the event. And, again, Deb has been ensuring that everything from, our basic costs for replacement of equipment, materials, and things that were lost, overtime for personnel involved in this evaluation. You don't think about all of the evaluation of things like all the electronics that are in the rooms, or furniture, or curriculum materials, that all of those things are undertaken, documented, and claims made against the loss that the district incurred. And we're very fortunate that Deb's been very accurate in terms of navigating all of that and making sure that we're properly documenting what happened in our district.
I appreciate that. And it's important to note that it's part of her job, but she's been doing remarkable things behind the scenes. Mary Pat, you are a science teacher, so you know a lot of things, more than most of us environmentally. What specific questions do you think that you have as staff member, or that you might want to share with Dr. Hanlon or Steve Kofol?
Sure. So I would say one of the big questions that keeps coming up, and before I even ask this question, I want to thank you both for everything that you've done to help to ensure that we've been able to come back in person as soon as possible and have everyone back in person. I'm amazed by all of your work and your commitment to enabling that. So with that said, as we are transitioning into the next phase, when the next phase comes around, will certain rooms become available?
So our goal is to bring available a couple of rooms that are on the 300s floor. that were not affected directly by the flood water. Those rooms did not really receive damage during the initial flood, and we kind of have them cordoned off at this point in time. And once we have removed materials from the north end of that hallway and worked our way to the south end, we will look at reopening those couple of rooms. But prior to reopening those rooms, we will certainly have air testing and air quality done to make sure that those rooms, even though sealed off and everything sealed tight, are up to par with the standards that we're to meet to have people reoccupy those rooms. So again, I hesitate to give you a timeline. I would love to tell you it's tomorrow, but I know that's not true. But I'm not, again, I want it done right, not rushed. So we will take all measures possible to make sure that the rooms that were not directly affected by flood will get turned back to you and your staff and students as soon as possible. Once, of course, we get those safety clearances and air qualities done.
Fantastic.
Speaking of,
Oh,
I'm sorry, real quick, Mary Pat, I apologize. Speaking of staffing, have these companies allocated as much staff as possible to this project, or are they spread thin, like Dr. Hanlon said, how other schools are being affected?
So I know with the Cleveland Water and Fire Restoration Company, they were managing multiple of these locations for the bad weather that we experienced, probably in some of the same locations that Dr. Hanlon just mentioned. So to answer your question, they allocated the staff that they could allocate and to get the job done as quickly as possible. I can assure you it was a large undertaking just to set up the dehumidification process throughout the course of that building. It's not like you throw a dehumidifier in your basement, turn it on. This thing was the size of a trailer, and then they had to run hoses and taping things off and sealing things up, setting up. There were probably over 75 floor fans going in that building, approximately 5 per room, just to get things dried up. Staffing was, in my opinion, as good as it could be. Obviously, if there are too many people involved, you start tripping over each other. So it's about managing personnel, managing contractors, making sure that people have what they need and that the district would provide anything that was necessary to speed the process along.
So I have a question, as I'm trying to think as a community member, if I drive by Chardon High School and I see a big dumpster of any sort, or signage put up, are there things that outsiders need to be aware of, just like that standard, or is there certain things that once the work done is started, should we be aware of for students and staff? Like, will it be noisier? Like those type of questions.
So yeah, you will see there's actually a storage container out front of the weight room area there. That's a 40 foot container that's containing about 8 classrooms worth of furniture. We were able to use some other spaces in the building to store the remaining furniture, as well as the teachers' materials and totes. We are using the totes that we had from the reconfiguration process, as we do every year. We moved all the chemistry and science materials over to a storage area that's near the other science classes, so they'll still have use of all that material. You'll see tarped windows. You'll see areas that say construction site or do not enter. Certain doors we obviously have made inoperable because we don't want anybody to enter the building at that location. And that's pretty much it, other than the walls that were put up inside of the building. You're really not going to see a whole lot driving past the Chardon High School there.
So they're going to start tomorrow. Go ahead, Dr. Hanlon.
Well, I would add to what Steve is sharing is that anything you do see outside with respect to disposal, again, our Safe Air is doing that all in compliance with industry standard disposal practices and so on. So, it's not anything out of the ordinary for them. And obviously they're going to be disposing of some floor tile and things like that as they remove it from the affected classroom. So anything that you see outside is done fully according to EPA regs and, industry standards for this type of work. I think the other point we probably mentioned it briefly, but through the course of this process, EA Group will be performing air quality assessments both, in the occupied spaces in our buildings and at the perimeters that are closed off by those walls that Steve mentioned. Those will be daily assessments of air quality in our school compared against industry standards to ensure that we don't have any issues. Again, the negative pressure, drawing air into the workspace, all of those conditions are set up to ensure that there are no breaches, if you will, of the containment. But the work will be monitored by EA Group as they go along as well. I think the other important point that I would mention is that all along in this planning process for this work, our contractors have emphasized that the removal of floor tile, if you think about a continuum of from 1 to 10, where 1 would be safer abatement projects and 10 would be the most challenging abatement projects, the removal of floor tile is down here on that safe end of abatement projects. And that's because the asbestos that was used to develop those materials, floor tiles, for example, it's bonded into the material of the tile. It's bonded into the material of the mastic that holds the tile to the floor. So it's not free asbestos, if you will, like you might have found years ago in pipe wrap and pipe insulation. It's already contained in the matrix of that floor tile material, and therefore it's pretty much contained already. So very much on the safe end of the spectrum for any work like this.
Yeah, we appreciate that information. The one thing that I want to make sure that everyone knows is when they do this work, it's probably going to make some noise, right, Steve? Like whether
Yes.
the removing tile might be quieter, but when they're actually doing the work, just like last year when they were doing the roof, you heard them drop, a piece of construction material on there. If you were right there, you heard it. Or, if they were walking above your space, you heard it. But now we're talking about machines that are going to be abating. So it's probably going to be noisier.
Yeah, that's for sure. You're talking about machines that are going to be grinding concrete. It's not going to be the quietest of operations. Henceforth, like I discussed earlier, we're going to try to start at the furthest north end and work our way south to be able to get you back those rooms as soon as possible. Once they get the grinders off of the floors, it's still going to be noisy. I mean, it's a construction site, and it's going to be, we asked everyone's cooperation, staff and students, in this process. We didn't ask for this, and we're just trying to deal with it as much as we can and to accommodate, the learning process here at Chardon High School.
With that, Steve, are there set hours that this contractors will be working in our building?
Most likely they'll be going 7 to 3:30. If they go past 3:30, it'll be dependent on where they end in their room, their shift. Like I said, they're going to be starting tomorrow, and they will be working Monday as well. So they'll have a whole day in the building with no students or staff in there to be able to get a jump and get those north rooms done. My hope is they can get as far as they can. About a day and a half per room to remove and then grind. So again, there's some variables and the timelines are flexible, but that's the plan.
We really appreciate the time you've given us today, and we want to certainly give you the opportunity to share with us, if you have not done already, any like things that you want to make sure that the public knows, our families know, that maybe we didn't ask in this podcast.
Well, I'll just say that I really appreciate the opportunity in this format to talk about how we've responded and what we're doing and what our plans are moving forward. And I just absolutely want to assure everyone that the safety of our students, staff, and community members that are in Chardon High School or any of our buildings, that's our highest priority. And our contractors are well aware of that, and they understand and will certainly be adhering to every industry standard in completing this process and doing it in a safe and efficient manner. But the emphasis is on doing it first safely, second efficiently. So, very, very fortunate that we have the contractors that we have, the experience with the district, and their attention to the detail that is necessary to do this appropriately.
At this point of our typical podcast, I would like to go back to what we usually do to close a podcast, and that is where we give gratitude. Whenever we have kids on, staff members, it's like a shout out moment. So I think we have a lot of people we'd like to shout out. So while you guys think about someone or some people you'd like to shout out this week, why don't we, the three at the high school, start with our shout out. So Mary Pat, who do you want to shout out?
So I would like to shout out to the families. This has not been an easy process, and going back to responses to calamity days and virtual days, having virtual learning at home. So being so responsive and understanding with that, in addition to being understanding and responsive with some of our altered learning spaces as we move forward, being back in person. So a big thank you to all of our families.
Absolutely. No doubt. Doug Hyam.
I'm going to send a shout out to our students. We all know how great our students are, but this is another example of them just rolling up their sleeves, getting the work done, dealing with what we need to deal with. We've had many students that have to leave our building at different parts of the day, come back and forth. And I think Ms. Pavicic, Mr. Murray would agree. We haven't had any problems with our students leaving the building, coming in and out, being very respectful of new learning areas. Ms. Pavicic talked about that. And we have like 6 classrooms going on in our media center, in a media center where we didn't have any a few years back. So just amazing what our students are doing, and really want to thank them for all their hard work.
I want to echo that. And not one complaint, not one, with the virtual learning, with everything. Just thank you. You guys have been phenomenal.
Yeah, and I want to echo that. And with our staff members, we've had so many different meetings. They've been so receptive. We've met again yesterday. The word that I will use in the week in reflection is resilient. They are very resilient. They are very optimistic. They're burning both ends of their candle. They're teaching in numerous places and moving, but they're so flexible and resilient. Our staff members, not just those who are teaching, but our building custodians and the maintenance people that have been coming in, along with all of our secretaries. Just what can I do? What can I do? So appreciative of our staff. Which kind of makes kind of like the sandwich here of gratitude of the things more closely. I don't want to steal any of your thunder. I'm sure that you want to echo similar things, Dr. Hanlon or Steve Kofol, but who you guys want to give shout outs to this week?
Well, it's funny. I feel like I need a podcast session just to do all the shout outs that I am thinking of, especially in relation to this particular situation. But you've identified the big 3 components, our maintenance and custodial staff, right from the moment this thing unraveled to, just everyone at the high school dealing with adjusting a schedule and communicating that out, our administrators, staff being so responsive in terms of accommodating spaces and how we could make instruction work for students. Just everyone's been incredible as we've worked through this, and our community for, the acknowledgments and support that they've expressed to us as we've worked our way through this and continue to make progress, make strides forward to returning to a full in-person learning environment. So, it's really been a team effort and to some extent, a family effort in our community to respond to this and to move our schools forward. Doug, I also just have a side one, and it's a tongue-in-cheek shout out to you to not put me on the spot as to whether or not we're having a snow day on Friday. But I know we're watching that very closely, and we'll see what happens. And stay tuned.
Hey, we've dealt with more difficult things than snow, so like, it is what it is. Steve Kofol.
I'm just going to underscore many of the things that were already said. The three of you, Doug, Mary Pat, and Doug, you guys been amazing. We've worked and seen a lot of each other these past few weeks, side by side. Decisions that had to be made very quickly, decisions that had to get changed very quickly. You've remained flexible. You've remained patient. Those are all things that I want to shout out to, because you guys have been an amazing trio, as well as Dr. Hanlon's leadership, Deb Armbruster's leadership. They were in the ankle deep water with squeegees and brooms. Deb wasn't behind the scenes, I'll point out. She was actually pushing water down the hallway. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the maintenance team and custodial team again. Fantastic job and opportunity working on days we were supposed to have off and on weekends to move furniture. We moved 13, 14 classrooms worth of furniture in about 8.5 hours on a Saturday. That's no small feat. They deserve the shout out. So your staff for their flexibility, your students for their amazingness, and just the community again. The Chardon way is get your hands dirty and pull up your bootstraps and do it. And I think that's what we've done with yet another challenge. So that's my shout out.
Yeah. And the thing I want to close with that is, like, I was in a meeting with you and your mom texted you. And it was like, love you. I know you're going through a bunch. Hope it's all is well. Heartbeat. All those. So like yes, part of our job is to do this, but we do sacrifice our family time, and so we certainly want to give a shout out to everybody in our extended families that realize, and that goes to all the way down the custodians. We sacrificed a lot of our holiday to make sure we can get things going.
Yeah, mom was a little upset because I had to cancel lunch with her the morning of this incident. Well, the morning of this incident happened, I had to cancel lunch for that day. So she forgave me, and we're rescheduling. So all is well.
Well, we appreciate your time on this podcast today. The last thing that we do is just you go Toppers. So we always peace out. Go Toppers. So
Go
thanks again.
Toppers.
Thank
Toppers.
you.